Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video I'm going to go through a new sculpting process for sculpting a new doll. So this doll is meant to be for the Calgary Zoo again. It's going to be part of a two-part doll, so it's a 4-month-old panda cub. So as you can see, I haven't sculpted the ears because that will be put on separately, but I'll just go through the process of sculpting this head and also 2 of the paws as well, which I will mould in silicone and then cast the parts in resin with a ball and socket armature. So I won't go through like every single part of the process of sculpting the doll parts, but I will go through the important parts, so stay tuned. So first off, we're using Monsterclay, and Monsterclay is a wax-based clay that is something that won't set, so it will stay soft and it becomes soft with heat, so you don't want to get it too hot, otherwise it will just melt. So I'm starting off with a core, and I'm using a piece of aluminium foil core that I've used for previous sculpts, so I just keep reusing it because you just don't want to chuck stuff out. It's a bit wasteful. So I'm just coating the aluminium foil with some of that Monsterclay, and I've heated the Monsterclay in a microwave so it is nice and soft. So I'm just getting my base of the sculpture together, and I'm letting it cool down a little bit so I can sculpt all of the parts together. So I'm just working out the eye area here, and I'm using some cabochons just for eye places. And you want to make sure that the eyes are centered, level, and they're not the same distance from the back of the head, so they're all even and symmetrical. So once the eyes are in, I go ahead and shape the mouth area and just fatten out the face of the panda just to get some definition on the snout area and around the sides of the head. So I usually get a lot of people asking how you keep the Monsterclay soft when you're working with it. So I have a lamp that produces a bit of heat, so I just have that lamp over the Monsterclay, and after I've microwaved the Monsterclay and it's nice and soft, I just put the Monsterclay under the lamp, and it keeps it at a nice steady temperature where I can mould it and everything as well. So I'm just marking out where I want the nose area to be, and I'm just going to put it in normal speed right now just so you can see how long it actually does take. So it doesn't take 10 minutes to sculpt something, it takes quite a number of hours to sculpt it, because I know when you put a video on fast speed, I know that gets forgotten about and you just think things are sculpted in 10 minutes. So it does take quite a number of hours to sculpt things. So I'm just marking out the nostrils here, and this little ball tool is a 3 set from Sculpey. You can find it in any craft stores, so I just found it locally here in Australia at a Spotlight store, but you can get it online and stuff as well, so it's pretty readily available. So I'm just sort of sketching out where I want the nose to be and where I want the fur not to be as well, so I'm just using a pointy tool just to sketch things out. So going ahead and building up the snout area and the eye area with some more Monsterclay, and I find it better to have soft Monsterclay when you're sculpting like parts that need to be a bit bigger, anything, because then you can smooth it all around and it moves a lot nicer than having to smooth some hard Monsterclay around, because that doesn't really work all that well. So at this point I was pretty unhappy with the eye placement, so I just took them off and just redid where I wanted the eyes to be, and just checking if they're symmetrical and everything as well. And also checking if the snout area is symmetrical, and just overall if I'm happy with how it's going. So moving on with the eye area, so I'm going to build up the brow line of the panda here. So just getting a big piece of clay, and I usually try to get clay that is the same size, just so I know that the shape will be roughly the same size on both sides of the face. But then, you know, they're not always the same, so you've got to add more here and there just to make it all symmetrical. So I noticed that one side of the snout is a different thickness, so just adding some more clay to that side. And moving on to the eye area, and I know a lot of people have different ways of doing the eyelids and stuff, so I like to roll a little worm, and then I just shape the eyelid around that glass cabochon. So the glass cabochons is something that I've only really started using in some of my recent dolls. So the older dolls I used to use Super Sculpey, and I would just sculpt the eyeballs in, but now I've changed the way I do things and I use glass cabochon, so I can cast glass eyes into the resin pieces, or I can paint them, so I have the choice of doing those two different things. So again, I just do two pieces around the eyes, like the bottom lid and the top lid, and that way you can control how much the lid is open as well, and then I'll go around and add some of that detail later on when I'm happy with the way the sculpt is going. So then I just go around and fill in any little bits that I think are too low or too flat or too thick with some of that clay again, and just going around making sure that everything is symmetrical, and I'm happy with the way things have turned out. And just adding a little ridge under the jaw of the panda, just because I know the jaw bit is a bit lower. Then just a little bit further back they have like a little ridge thing where the fur sticks out, so just sculpting that in as well, and then just going through and adding the fur. So I have a lot of questions asking why I actually add fur. So as you can see that when it doesn't have fur, it doesn't really look like anything, it just looks like a half sculpted thing. So when you go around and add the fur, I find that it makes it more final and it gives it more depth and just adds a bit more texture to the sculpture, and you can actually see what it looks like when it's supposed to have fur, if that makes sense. So you don't have to do it, it's just something I prefer to do, just so I can see the finality of the sculpt and to see if it actually looks like what I'm supposed to be sculpting. So it also helps me with the way the fur direction goes. So if you look at animals, they have certain patterns on their furs, so where it grows and what way it grows. So it also helps you when you are attaching the fur to the face to follow that direction. So just a bit of real time just to see how long it actually does take. So I am a bit cautionary around the eye area just because I want it to have that lid and not fur right to the eyeball. So this is something that I have changed in my time of making dolls as well, is that I fur pretty close to the ridge now, and I just leave like a tiny little slither of what would be skin around the eyes. So here's what we have so far. So I will be going to mold and cast this, and so I haven't sculpted the ears or anything because they are going to be separate because the panda head is quite long, so that would just be a waste of resin and time and money, but yeah, I'll be making them out of fur. So moving on to some paws, and I'm only going to be sculpting two paws, the left and the right paw, and I'll be using them for all four of the feet. So I'll only have to make just one mold of the two paws. That way it saves on mold and time, not so much on resin but or cost, but definitely time if you're going to factor time into your costs. So I don't usually spend too much time on making paws or feet or claws for any of my dolls, just because I know a lot of them is going to be covered with fur, so there's no need to be too particular about it. Unless you're doing something like bird feet or something like that that will be painted, then you want to spend a bit of time on that. But because this is going to be mostly covered in fur, that you don't have to be too particular about the way it looks, just the painted bits really. And I also like to add the fur to the feet as well, just so I know it is looking right, and it makes it a bit more final when it's something's finished, rather than just having it all just choppy clay. But again, I don't spend too much time on doing the fur for this as well. I tend to do bigger strokes and stuff with the claws, because again it's going to be covered in fur. So just a look back of what we've sculpted so far. So we have the head piece and we have the 2 feet piece, which will now going to be molded in silicone and cast in resin. So that video will be upcoming very shortly as well. So that is it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. If you have any requests, you can leave it in the comments down below. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!